The old rancher found a woman collapsed in the snow near his fence, like she'd appeared out of nowhere. He carried her inside. The next morning, she opened her eyes and said to him, "Good morning, husband." Eli slowly set down his coffee. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding." He was right, just not in the way he thought. Eli Kane was 51 years old and had spent the last 6 of those years talking mostly to a horse named Gerald. Not because he was antisocial, because after his wife Margaret passed consumption, 3 years after diagnosis, 2 years after hope, the silence of the Kane Ranch felt less like loneliness and more like the only honest thing left. People kept trying to fill it with casseroles and church invitations. Eli preferred the quiet. He was big-shouldered and weathered, the kind of man who looked like he'd been left out in the sun and the rain until only the essential parts remained. He ran 200 acres of cattle land alone. Woke at 4 a.m., slept at 9 p.m., repeated. Gerald, the roan quarter horse, understood him perfectly. That night, the night of the blizzard, Eli had gone out to check the fence after a steer broke through the south pasture. A simple job, 30 minutes, tops, end quote. He almost didn't see her. She was lying face down in the snow just beyond his fence line, one hand still gripping that leather trunk like it held everything she owned in this world. He knelt beside her, checked her pulse, still there, but faint. What in the... He looked around. Nothing. No road nearby, no lights. The nearest town was 14 miles east, and the storm had already buried the trail. He didn't think. He just picked her up. Her name was Lin Meiling. She was 34, from Chengdu, China, and she had been in Montana for exactly 4 days. Eli learned this slowly the next morning, over black coffee and scrambled eggs, while she sat wrapped in Margaret's old quilt, her hands shaking around the mug. Her English was careful and precise, like she'd practiced it from books. Every sentence measured. "You saved my life," she said. "Anyone would have," he replied. "No," she said quietly. "Not anyone." She told him she'd been heading to a town called Birchfield to meet a man her intended husband, arranged through a correspondence marriage broker her family had trusted in Shanghai. An American man she'd only known through letters. She'd crossed the Pacific by steamship, then ridden the iron rails west from San Francisco. The stagecoach driver, seeing the storm building, had turned back early. She'd been left at a crossroads with her trunk and told the town was just over the ridge. "In cloth shoes," Eli said flatly. She looked down, embarrassed. "I did not know Montana." Nobody really does. Then, and this was the part that stayed with Eli, she reached into her trunk and pulled out a folded letter, a photograph tucked inside. A man. "This is my husband," she said. Eli, the silence stretched like barbed wire. Eli took the letter. "Read it slowly." It was written on behalf of a man called Eli Carson, a rancher, it said, looking for a devoted wife to share a good Montana life, warm, hardworking, eager for companionship. The photograph was definitely him, taken years ago at the Birchfield Harvest Fair. Eli Kane had never written a single word of it. "Someone forged this," he said. Lin Meiling stared at him. Then she looked at the letter again. Then she sat very, very still, the way people sit when the floor has just disappeared beneath them. She had left her family in Chengdu, told her parents she was going to be a married woman in America, spent every coin of her savings on the steamship fare, crossed an ocean on the strength of a stranger's letters and a borrowed photograph. And now she was sitting in a stranger's kitchen in a snowstorm, wrapped in a dead woman's quilt, looking at a man who had no idea she existed 3 days ago. "I am so sorry." The storm locked them in for 3 days. In those 3 days, Eli learned things about Lin Meiling that surprised him. She was not fragile. The first morning, she asked to help with chores. Real help, not polite hovering. He handed her a task, expecting her to quit. She didn't. Not. She hauled feed in the cold without complaining, learned to navigate the barn by day 2, and made a soup from his near-empty pantry that was the best thing he'd eaten in 6 years, maybe longer. She learned things about him, too. She found Margaret's portrait on the mantel, a small oil painting, the only one he owned, and asked about her. Most people didn't ask. They just nodded at the grief and moved past it. Lynn stood in front of that portrait for a long time. Then she said, "She looks like someone who laughed easily." Eli had to set down what he was holding. "She did," he said. That night, Lynn cried quietly in the guest room. He could hear it through the thin cabin walls, not over him. Over her own humiliation, her own broken faith, the enormous ocean she'd crossed toward a lie. Eli sat on the other side of that wall for a minute. Then he knocked gently. "There's no shame in being fooled by someone who practiced lying," he said through the wood. "Shame belongs to them." The crying stopped. A long pause. On day 2, with the snow thinning, Eli lit the oil lamp and sat with Lynn to piece together what had happened. The letters, all 12 of them, had been written by a broker in San Francisco, a man who ran a fraudulent matchmaking agency preying on families in China, promising respectable American husbands. He used stolen photographs of real men, charged steep broker fees, pocketed the money, and handed women false documents and forged correspondence, sending them across the Pacific toward nothing. Lynn had sent him $40 silver, her entire savings. At least 7 other women had been discovered in similar circumstances across California and the Montana. Lynn had enough coin left for a boarding house in Billings, barely a month's stay. After that, nothing. The journey back to China meant another steamship fare she didn't have. Her family couldn't send money fast enough. The nearest Chinese community was 2 towns over, and the roads were still treacherous. Eli offered her the guest room. A few weeks. No strings. She accepted, quietly, gratefully. Those weeks became the strangest and most alive Eli had felt since Margaret. Lynn reorganized his entire kitchen on day 4. He started to argue, then ate the best breakfast of his life and went quiet. She taught him a card game her grandmother played back in Chengdu. He taught her to ride. She was terrified of Gerald for exactly 40 minutes, then bonded with the horse so completely that Gerald would follow her across the paddock like a dog. They talked, really talked, about failure, about grief, about the weight of being far from home, emotionally or literally. On the last night, before she was to leave for Billings, she was already packed. "I will find work in the city," she said steadily. "Then I will save. Then I will go home. I will tell my parents I was foolish. They will be angry. Then they will be glad I am safe." 6 months later, a letter arrived at the cane ranch. Lynn was in Billings, working at a seamstress shop. Good work, steady pay. Her employer was a kind woman who asked no hard questions. She was saving carefully. A slow boat home was already within reach. She was writing, she said, to thank him properly in ink, the way her grandmother had taught her. 3 pages, front and back. The handwriting small and precise. She told him about the seamstress shop, her small rented room, a stray cat she'd adopted who she named Gerald II, which she admitted was ridiculous. At the end of the letter, she wrote, "You once said there is no shame in being fooled by someone who practiced lying. I think of that often. You gave me back something I didn't know I had lost. Not just warmth, but dignity. That is not a small thing, Eli. That is everything. All." Eli read the letter twice, set it on the mantel, next to Margaret's portrait. Gerald, stabled outside, whinnied once in the cold morning air. Eli poured his coffee, looked out at the white-gray Montana sky. He wrote back, 3 paragraphs, his handwriting terrible, as always. But, he wrote back. And sometimes that's how it starts, not with a wedding or a declaration, but with a blizzard, a fence line, and one stranger deciding that another stranger's life was